All right, guys, today I have Ryan Gill from Hunt Primitive on the podcast. I have been looking forward to interviewing Ryan. Super interesting guy. This guy builds traditional archery equipment from beginning to end. So, bow, string, arrow, the point, everything done by his hand and only wood and stone. So all of his heads are actually rock that he's flint-knapped down to arrowheads, and then he's killed animals with them. He also uses the atlatl, the traditional atlatl, like you put the arrow on top of the stick and fling it into something. He's killed buffalo with that. He's killed wild pigs with that. We talk about it all. The guy's insanely unique. We talk about what you would expect in terms of just that gear and what's involved in hunting with it and building it. But we also talk about some more philosophical things around hunting, historical hunters, all that good stuff. So, without further ado, let's dive right into it. All right, Ryan, I'm pumped to have you, man. And I'm going to start with the question that I always warm up with, or at least lately I've been warming up with when I'm interviewing hunters. And that is, what's your bucket list hunt? And I'm going to narrow it down. It's got to be a primitive based hunt, which I guess probably for you is not narrowing it down. But
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Nobody else is going to have this one, I guarantee you.
Oh,
Um,
perfect, man.
and honestly, it's probably, not going to say never, never, but the logistics, the headache, the absolute danger, and probably the death threats that would come after it, quite honestly, it would be to put a group of real good atlatl hunters together with Clovis projectiles and go to Africa and kill an elephant just with
Okay.
atlatls and stone tools. Um, that would be phenomenal. But like I said, I don't. There for a while, I was pretty insistent that I was just going to push forward and make it happen. And I don't know in the end if it's really going to be worth it or not. I don't know.
Sure.
I said I'm not saying never, but I'm not
Yeah.
promising to it either.
Dude, I am very happy that you started with that, and then also bummed that you started with that, Ryan, because now this whole podcast is going to be about that, dude. So it's funny because people have asked me what my bucket list hunt is, and it's to go to Africa and hunt elephant also, like in
Oh,
the the traditional, like the traditional 5 to 10 helper hunter guide,
yep.
the whole tracking deal, the free range deal. And the reason is I've never hunted Africa, Ryan, but I've over the years of guiding, I've guided like hundreds of guys, and I've guided some guys that have spent money all over the world. And man, it's amazing to me how uniform it has been when I ask them like, hey, what was your favorite hunt? It's amazing how many of them will say an elephant hunt. And
Huh.
it used to surprise me until I heard it 5 or 6 times. And I'm like, okay, there's like
Yeah.
something to this. And then your deal brings a whole nother level to it, man. Like, why is it? Is it because it's do you feel like it would represent more of like how we used to hunt, or why is that like why would that be one of your goals?
Uh, Group hunting without a doubt. I enjoy being around people. I Let me back that up. I don't particularly like people, but I like to be around people, if that makes sense. They just got to be
Sure.
the right people. And hunting with others has really opened the door. I just really enjoy it. I used to just use my hunting time for my personal time, and I didn't want to hunt around anybody. And then as soon as I started hunting around others and it wasn't all about me, I started to enjoy the experience a lot more. And when it comes to primitive hunting, there's a lot of scenarios where you're way better off by yourself. But then there's going to be some scenarios like killing something the size of an elephant that really isn't going to be a one man show. And it doesn't make sense to do it that way because you wouldn't really have just even a small group. You wouldn't even really have a small group that was like, hey, let's go kill this mammoth, which, let's even change the word into mammoth because it would be in the Ice Age
Sure.
and hunting with Clovis projectiles. It's not even an elephant, but I just use the terms interchangeably because people understand elephant better than proboscidean or mastodon or any of that kind of stuff. So
Right.
um, you wouldn't have like this small group of nomadic, people. Let's just say anywhere from 5 to 10, even 15, and then decide, oh, we're going to go take on this mammoth, unless you really can't find anything else. maybe bison are rare in the area. That would really going to be your number one animal to go after, is going to be like a bison. Um, the only reason to really go after an elephant-sized animal unless is if you have a very big community that needs that much meat. So realistically, I don't know how many people that would look like. It would be probably impossible to get the number of right people that I would want. Um, I think a good solid group of somewhere between 5 and 8 would be great. I think if you get too many, there's going to be an added danger element. And then the opposite of that would be to look at some of the old footage of Africans that are spearing elephants, and they'll have an entire village out there spearing them. So
Right.
I would either say it would have to be a small group of the right guys, or it would have to be a whole dang village. And, we're never going to find that today.
Sure.
But
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of a big enough group of people that like would want to do it or be competent to not be a liability instead of asset or whatever.
yeah. And so to do it in the group sense, to me, just it makes more sense anthropologically as opposed to, just one guy going out and deciding, well, I'm going to take an elephant. I don't think they were ever really going to do that. And I think that you could possibly, with one really good hit, it can happen. You could kill one with one single spear throw. I think you could, but I'm betting with an animal that size and the projectiles, especially with all the data that I've collected from other hunts and the math that I've put together on what it would really take to do this, I think it's more or less, I don't even know if I'm allowed to cuss on your podcast,
No,
but
it's fine, man.
it's going to be a shit show is basically what it's going
Sure.
to be. It's not going to be a good clean kill. Um, and that's again why you're going to want a bunch of guys throwing a bunch of spears into it. And like I said, you might bring it down, and if you get a spear on each side and lacerate lung tissue, I mean, it's gonna die. I mean,
Right.
shoot, if you put one or two in the guts, it's gonna die at some point. But, that's why I'm saying I just don't think it's gonna be presented very well. So that's why I don't think it's ever really gonna happen.
Yeah.
But,
No, I get it. Just like the optics of it, right?
hmm
And of course, probably all the other things. I don't know what the regulatory environment is around that, but I assume you've got some obstacles there too, or limitations where you could do it or whatever. But it's really interesting though because in the concept that you call it a shit show. I mean, a lot of these hunts like that, Ryan. I think even with modern hunting gear, they're shit shows. Guys, biltong, okay? I have been obsessed with this stuff for 3 or 4 years. Ever since I got on a keto, carnivore, paleo-esque type of diet, I've had a hard time finding healthy snacks. Biltong is a great option, particularly the slabs that have this fat on the side. That's where your energy is if you're a fat burner like me. Super simple ingredients in this, guys. Literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. Compare that to your gas station jerky. A great snack in the backcountry or just day to day. Biltong Depot is a huge supporter of my content. Go to their website, biltongdepot.com. Use my discount code CLIFFG, CLIFFG for 15% off at checkout and to support this content. Thanks, guys. You know
well, I
what I
think
mean?
so.
Like
Yeah.
in the way that you're defining it, I think that for better or worse, yeah, and this we could talk about this the whole podcast too. So much of that is cloaked from the content that people put out. But let's be
Right.
honest, like I mean, most elephants, even on rifle hunts, are not getting like one shot, drop
Right.
dead. Um, so even not even elephants. I mean, you can go to a lot of different animals. That's probably not the case. I know
Sure.
you've hunted buffalo a few times, and I'm sure that's you know how that goes too. And same deal with rifles and all of that. But really, it's a cool concept, man. I guess all I can say is I'd be the first one to watch it on your channel because
Yeah.
it'd be something very neat to watch. But it brings me to another question, man. Like, what's your so when I watch your content, there's a part of me that's like, okay, this guy is a nerd when it comes to history, anthropology, and that's why he's doing it. And then there's another part of me when I watch your content, and I'm like, no, this guy is about building up a really cool skill set that not a lot of other people have, right? And like these are, that's why he's doing this. What is it, man? Or is it both?
Reframe the question for me just a little bit. Like, why? Because I can go so many different routes. So I guess I don't know exactly which direction you want me to
Yeah,
take.
I got you. But maybe the answer is both. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, what's the main reason that you hunt this way, and then why so deep into it? I mean, I know lots of guys that hunt,
Okay.
just with a recurve, just with they make their own longbow, they go on hunts, but you're taking this to a whole new level. Why is that, Ryan?
Um, I would say two to three things. One is pure challenge. So to me, this is the most challenging way to hunt. And I grew up hunting from a very young age, and I got some compound kills early. I think I killed my first hog at age 10 with a compound. Shot one with a 30-30 at age 7. Didn't really have any issue shooting stuff with rifles, handling guns, shooting a compound bow. And then my dad was a traditional archer, and he always said, if you want to have fun in archery, shoot traditional, but if you're going to be really serious about killing game, then you need to shoot a rifle or a compound. And so that's kind of how we lived until I got old enough to just kind of start going out on my own, like really on my own. And after carrying a gun in a compound for a while, it was almost like I just knew I was going to kill something. And this was a way that I could really bring a challenge in, to be like, I don't have to kill something, but I just want the most challenge. And it started off as I just wanted to build my own bow and kill one animal. And if I could do that, I thought that that would be super cool. And then, of course, as soon as you do that, the floodgates are open. And then it went into stone points, later on after killing a few deer with my bow. I was like, I just want to kill one with stone points. And then that was a huge journey. But then as soon as I did that, there was no going back. And then next thing you know, it's, well, I want to kill something with an atlatl, even just one thing. And then as soon as you do it, you're like, no, this is amazing. Now I got to do this all the time. And so it's just always been about the pure challenge. And I'll say what kind of helped too is being in Florida and coming from Florida. Nobody comes to Florida to hunt big bucks, because I think, I don't know the exact numbers on it, but if you look at stuff like Boone and Crockett or Pope and Young, there's like none that come from Florida. It
Okay.
just does, not from the wild anyway. And so the chances of going out and killing like a big buck, that's usually what people go to when they want a challenge. I think, that's where, if they
Yeah, they
want more of a
start the
challenge,
yeah.
yeah, I want a better buck quality, but they don't change how they hunt. They're just holding out for a better animal. And so I killed a couple bucks in Florida that were pretty darn good, that honestly I'll probably never beat in my life. And I shot them with a rifle, one of which I shot out of the homemade wood ladder stand that I built to bow hunt out of when I first got started. And I shot that buck at 8 yards where I could have shot it with a bow. And I just said, I'm glad that I got it, but I don't ever need to do that again. Now, it's not the last time that I ever gun hunted, but after that, it was like, man, I could have killed that with my bow. And then, of course, I had to ask myself later, well, would you have rather known that you got it with a rifle, or would if you would have shot it and lost it with your bow? And that was a defining moment for me, to where I said, you know what? I think I would have rather risked losing it and not getting it at all than to shoot it with a rifle. If I had to do it all over again, what would I do? And I was like, bow hunt and take a shot at it with an arrow. And so that just kind of set the wheels in motion. And then I was able, a lot of people say, oh, you say that until there's a big buck there, or you don't get one. Friends will tell you that, sure, I like some big antlers, but for the most part, it's not the driving factor to me. The real challenge is building the weapon system and going out and hunting. And I would much rather shoot a doe with sticks and rocks than to shoot a world record whitetail with anything else. It
Right.
just doesn't do it for me. And I know most guys can't relate to that, and that's perfectly fine. And that's why I don't care anything about clubbing them over the head with it. Um,
Sure.
and so I would say that that's the main reason, is it's the pure challenge of it. And then when it came to actually turning this into a business too, and then later on, I kind of realized that I truly believe that this is my God-given purpose, just because I am so driven and I'm pretty darn good at it. And every time I've tried to even move away from it and say, well, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing, I get sucked right back in. And it's not
Right.
even for a want, it's because it's to benefit somebody else or to benefit my family. We grew an income off of it. It's something now that I can't get away from. And I also just have this deep desire to understand how this would have been done before written history.
Right.
Um, and that just has nagged at me forever to try to solve some of these mysteries. And I don't think they really need to be solved, but I can't describe it any other way than it's just simply my purpose.
Yeah. No, and that last aspect of your answer, Ryan, like I want to talk about that more because man, in all the modern hunting that I've done, I can't tell you how many times I've sat down, and I would say that in terms of like anthropology and the history of hunters, I'm like up the nerd scale. I've read a fair amount about it just out of interest, you know. But I don't know how many times I've sat there and debated whether or not what I've been told is total bullshit. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just when you're sitting there, you know, I'm into finding arrowheads and that sort of thing. There's a couple guys that got me into it out in Utah a bit. That we do these long range shooting schools, and then we'd go find arrows between classes or whatever. And just looking at where they were and things like that, it made me realize a lot of my preconceptions about how people hunted were probably not true. And so I want to dive deep into that. But before we go there, something in your answer there kind of triggers me a little bit. Right? Triggers not the right term, but
Not anymore.
yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not. And I don't even mean it that way. It's not a negative thing, but I guess it
Yeah.
intrigues me because one thing I run into with my audience, Ryan, is that I feel like a so the way I construe your answer is that the process is the challenge for you, right? Like improving the process of everything you're doing. You've structured and framed a challenge in that, and one of the benefits in my mind, man, is it makes it so you have a lot of local hunting opportunity, and you don't have to worry about that, right? Does that make sense? So, and the reason I bring that up is a lot of my audience, Ryan, like I feel bad for them because a huge proportion of them are elk hunters, and elk is skyrocketing in terms of just like the monetary cost of doing it. There's not a lot of things on the horizon that are increasing tags. Everybody from your side of the country has to drive all the way across the country. I love it. It's a giant part of my life. I'm not. It's not that, but I feel like if people might focused on kind of like the angle that you're taking, they would realize that they're sitting in a world of opportunity in terms of hunts. Do you have any thoughts on that, or am I, you know?
No, that's for sure. I mean, I can go a lot of different directions with that, and I'm sure maybe we will further on in the conversation. But we didn't have much for opportunities or money growing up. So it was hunting public land, or eventually I got access to hunt 20 acres that was behind the place that my dad worked. And then later I worked too. And so I'd get off work or even sometimes before work, depending on the time of the year, but I could go out and hunt a little bit and just on this 20 acres. And it's like that it's like finding a way to make it challenging and making it fun. So at
Sure.
first when I started hunting that, I was hunting it with a rifle, and then it's like I could have shot, I think it was something like 3 bucks in one day I could have shot, and then I started not shooting. I used to just shoot whatever would come. I didn't care.
Right.
Whatever was legal or whatever didn't, probably sometimes not legal when I was a kid.
Sure.
But whatever would come out, I would shoot. And then I finally got to that point where I was like, well, I don't need to shoot that little buck. It's not doing anything for me. And I was following the same path as everybody else was of, well, I just need a bigger buck and a bigger buck. And then, of course, as soon as I got to that point, it's like, well, the chances of me getting one bigger than this, very slim. And it's like, am I going to be excited continuing with this, or do I want something different out of it? But then archery season, I just wanted to be in the woods. So what I really wanted was just another opportunity to go out and hunt. And I'd kind of gotten away from the compound hunting for a while and just didn't bow hunt at all, even for a couple of years. And then that, just the opportunity to be in the woods brought brought me back to archery. And actually, what's funny is when I first did it, I actually went and picked up the compound bow, got it out of the attic, and I went and shot it a couple times. And I was like, I can't deal with it. And I just went and picked up a stick bow that I made when I was 13, which was terribly underpowered, and just started shooting that. And I was like, this feels good to me. This is how I want to do it. And
Sure.
then later that didn't pan out so good. It was underweight. I ended up shooting a hog and hit it high. It would have killed it had I not hit it high. Um, but then I was like, I need to build a stronger bow or a better bow. And so that got the ball rolling again. But I just wanted to be in the woods, and then got to a point where now I just want to bow hunt all deer season or all gun season too. And so I had very limited opportunities, except that at least I would say once a year, once every 2 years, Dad would save up and he would take me to go hunt family's place in Montana or
Okay.
in Pennsylvania back on the family farm, that kind of stuff. So I did get opportunities to go hunt, say like mule deer does. I shot one mule deer buck um, when I was, I don't know, 12 or 13 or so, I can't remember. And so I did have at least some of those experiences, but around home, we didn't have a farm to grow up and hunt on. It was public land and this very small piece that came actually much later in my late teens. And so this was just a way that um, I know then it sounds weird. It's like, how did you ever get into, if it's challenging to hunt public land and all that? I guess maybe I was just fortunate in that when I hunted, things seemed to show up.
Sure.
And so it just kind of fell together. But now going back to what you were talking about with your question about coming here is I'll think a lot of people do. They want to take the adventure hunts. They want to be able to go hunt a fancy place or a new place. They want to hunt elk. They want to see the countryside. But if they did dabble into, even if it was traditional bow hunting, or maybe they don't bow hunt at all and they're just a rifle hunter, if they kept trying to make it more difficult and adopting a new way of hunting, they would actually probably feel really fulfilled hunting at home, and they wouldn't really feel the need to travel so much. And I still travel a little bit, but I don't consider myself an adventure hunter. In fact, I love to just be home and hunting
Sure.
deer and hogs in my home state of Florida. I am so tickled to just be here and do that.
Right.
Um, but, like to say there's an ass for every seat. So, there's some
Sure.
folks that are gonna want to elk hunt no matter what. Um,
Yeah, I mean, one thought I have, and this is not putting words in your mouth at all. It's just my observation, Ryan, is that guys that have the mentality you're talking about, they also have the added bonus that they become better hunters a lot faster. And I think it's just an iteration thing, like within t- like time, like constrained time, right? If you're a guy that only gets, because you're focused on, these big trips like once or twice a year, I personally think it's actually really hard to build up just your, whatever you want to call it, your instinctual hunting skill set, whatever. It's really hard to do that because every time you get back into the field, you're just relearning half of what you learned 6 months ago. You know what I mean? And I encourage guys to, I mean, like to do what you're saying. Like, hey, if I mean, you can change weapon, you can change style, but you can also change species. Like I love hunting grouse with a bow. Like I hate to admit it because it's like people will bust my balls, but I almost like it. It's during elk season, but I like it almost as much as like the prime time during the day when we're calling in elk. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like in the middle of the day, I could go out and walk roads and shoot grouse with my recurve. It's so much fun, and to
hmm
me, it's just added ways to just improve on that skill set. And man, I see it with kids like crazy. It's you get these kids who by the time they're 18, if they've just hunted anything, rabbits, pigs, whatever they had around them, that experience they build up by the time they're 18 and they're an adult male, it's almost impossible for a grown man to catch up to them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's really wild.
Yeah. Primitive bow hunting in general will make you a far, far better hunter because you have to get close. It's a
Sure.
discipline that you can't really have any shortcuts on, and it takes years really to get good at it. But that's just the same as, well, let's look at it like this. When I was in middle school, maybe early high school, I played guitar and sang and was fairly decent at it. And I was really interested in bluegrass music. And so then, can't find anybody to play with. But in my head, I was like, well, I want to learn to play banjo and I want to learn to play mandolin and about anything I get my hands on. And so I would constantly go and get this new instrument to learn to play, and I would learn some stuff on it. And then at one point, my dad said, if you took all the time and energy you put into learning all of these and just put it into guitar, you'd be pretty darn good. And I thought, you know what, that's absolutely right. And I stopped doing all that and I put it into guitar and then played professionally for a little while. It really wasn't my calling, but it was absolutely right. And that goes back to what you were saying about how having to start over every time that you take these one or two big trips a year and you're hunting a new place, a new animal. It's like if your goal is to really be a good hunter. Now, if it's to go and have the experience and see the place and try to get one of each animal, then bring a rifle and go hunt all these new areas. You're not focusing on being a hunter. You're out collecting experiences or trophies or however it is you want to put it together.
Sure.
It's not a derogatory thing to me at all. It's whatever makes you happy. But if your goal is to really be the best hunter you can be, then just putting as many opportunities as possible at home is going to ultimately make you a better hunter. As you said, hunting grouse. It's like me hunting birds with a BB gun when I was, six,
Yeah.
7, 8 years old. It's just being out there. Even now, when I go out and we're hunting deer, if there's hogs, it's all of a sudden now it's a hog hunt, or if there's a rabbit, now all of a sudden it's a rabbit hunt. We're out just being opportunistic and just learning every animal that you come up on, every stalk you do. Um, it teaches you to be a better hunter. And that's where I said earlier that I don't really consider myself an adventure hunter so much anymore. It's to me, it's all about the equipment and learning as much as I can about that, and then becoming the best hunter that I can be.
Right.
And also recreating what early people did. Early people didn't sit around the campfire and say, next year I want to go on a moose hunt, and next year I want to go on a caribou hunt.
Right.
They didn't even really know that these existed, in many areas. So what they did was they just got really tight and really good at hunting their place with their weapons. They got their weapon system really, really tight. They got their strategy really, really tight. They were the best at what they did in their area. And that's what made them such good hunters. And so
Sure.
that's why I love the fundamentals of just getting in the woods and hunting here at my home. I think I love that more than even when I went out to Idaho and I killed an elk on public land with sticks and rocks, which is a huge feat.
I do very few endorsement deals and I do no paid reviews because it would affect the type of content, quality of the knowledge I could put out. So an important part of my business model is my membership group. There's paid and free options. I do a weekly live stream there. There is a thriving community of folks that are helping everybody become a better outdoorsman. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're an expert, there's something there for you. Go join, guys. It helps me out a ton. It's the way to support this content and to support me. I'll see you there. All the info is at pwchuntsquad.com.
And I love that, but I have no interest in going back and doing it again, or very
Right.
little interest, because it was just like the chances of doing it again are so slim. And then we just got back a month ago from Arizona hunting javelinas on public land, which should have been ultimately a much easier hunt. And I didn't get one. We got some good opportunities, but I came home without one. But I can look at the experience and say, I was there, I saw it, I saw the animals, I know I can kill them, but now I
Sure.
have no interest in going and doing that again. It's just coming right back and focusing on, I really just want to focus on the fundamentals here where I live and hunt and be the best hunter that I could be. And I think
Yeah.
that is the big difference with people, that they almost have to ask themselves then, do they want to be a really good hunter, or do they want to be a good either, or do they want to be like an adventure seeker? And
Yeah.
maybe you can do both. I'm not sure. And
Yeah, but
maybe
I
there's
think
a
it I think what you said is like it's not a derogatory question because I feel the exact same way, Ryan. Like if you want to just travel to epic places and hunting's part of that. I totally get that. That's like, I mean, I totally get that. It's not like that's lower on the totem pole of like
No.
awesomeness than becoming a better hunter. But I think it's hard to do both for the all the reasons that you've mentioned. I think it's hard. I think it's hard because you just don't get the compounding knowledge that you do if you're hunting a lot. You know what I mean? And hunting a lot locally and that sort of thing. So no, I think there's lots of I agree with you in a lot of ways on that. But I want to bring it back to your elk hunt because again it'll be I think probably interesting to the a big chunk of my audience. Can you think of any skill sets that when you was that your first elk hunt, Ryan?
First, I guess real one. I lived in Montana for 2.5 years, and for some reason, well, I never had. I guess I did have back then. I did have an elk tag at one point. I always thought that I had more time there. I never really planned on moving, and there weren't really elk around where I lived. and I
Okay,
had and I had a wife that was not very comfortable living off grid in Montana. And then we had a 1 year old or an
I
infant at
got you.
that point. And so it was
Sure.
like I can't really leave them to just go into the mountains, nor did I
Yep.
really have the honestly at that point I didn't even have the money for gas to drive to the mountains, let
Yeah, I
alone,
got you. Sure.
so but yeah, as far as like, okay, I'm gonna go elk hunting, that was the first
Yep.
opportunity.
So
But I wanted that mountain adventure just to be like, this is what I didn't get in Montana, even though I live
right.
there, so let's go do that. And then mission accomplished.
Yeah, which is epic, man. You know, the fact that you got it done with and just so everybody knows, like because I didn't even give people the context here, but explain to people what you killed the elk with so they understand what we're talking about.
An Osage wood bow and a cane arrow with a stone point.
All and you made all of it yourself.
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so which is pretty wild given that just killing an elk kind of regardless of where you're at or private land, public land, whatever, with a compound bow is pretty damn hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you got another level to it. But I think the context of you're going out west on your first dedicated elk hunt, from on that species you're fairly new. When you got out in the field, Ryan, what were there specific skill sets that you felt were like, oh, like I'm very I'm very good at this and this is helping me a lot. Can you think of anything specifically that was like very transferable to you when you got out there?
I think just patience and trust in myself, knowing that it all really works the same way. You just have to put yourself in front of the animal.
Right.
And I mean, realistically, I shot it the first night. It's just pure
So you had
luck.
some
It was,
luck. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, really was. And then didn't even make a good shot. It was moving, and you don't think about how fast an animal the size of an elk walks.
Yeah.
So you just shoot at a deer at 10 yards. You don't really have to do much for leading. You just aim on. And so this elk's walking by at like 20 yards. So I
Yeah.
shoot and it hits low behind the heart. So it hit down in the stomach. So the fact that we
Yeah.
even recovered this at all was amazing. But ended up tracking it the entire next day, and it went like a mile and a half as the crow flies, but that's gaining elevation the entire time, and then over
Right.
the other side. So um, I think just a confidence that you know how all of this works. So it doesn't matter where I'm hunting; it's just hunting at the end of the day, and
Right.
knowing how animals look, how they react. If like you can read their body language, are they concerned about something? Are they just milling along? And it's like just kind of all the experience of watching deer or anything else, it puts you at ease. It's like I know what's going through this elk's mind, and he has no idea I'm here right now.
Yeah.
And it's so real easy to wait for it to come by and get the shot.
Yeah. And those sort of things are really hard. And I don't mean this in an egotistical way or anything like that. I think it's just the facts, Ryan. It's those are really hard to explain to somebody. The way I would describe it to somebody is I can't tell you how many times I've been guiding somebody and we're stalking an elk and they step forward when I would never step forward. You know what I
Right.
mean? And like in my mind, I'm like, oh, dude, like why? You know what I
Yep.
mean? But I couldn't explain to them in words like, "Oh, you picked the wrong time, dude." You know what I mean? And it's like it's not I mean, it's a bunch of, you know, practical variables, right? Like, the if there's stuff between us blocking us, if there's eye contact from the animal, all that stuff. But it's not just one thing. It's like 20 things. It's the wind shaking the leaves so we can move. Like just like a
Yeah.
million things that I can't explain, but you do become better at it. You know what I mean? It's for sure a differential. It's apparent, and like you say, it's across species. It's just an experience thing. It's not me or you can't do a YouTube video on it.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. It's very tough. I wrote about it for a while in one of my books, but one of the things I like to point back to is most people have seen this if they've been in the woods. You go, you're if you're sneaking up on a deer, or maybe you're just in a tree stand, but it catches a little bit of movement, but it's not sure what it is, and now all of a sudden it's on alert. It wasn't
Mhm.
before, but it's looking your direction, but it doesn't see you. And then the next thing that happens is it puts its head down, and that's when the person takes the next step. And they always ruin it because the deer put its head down to pretend it was still feeding. And if you watch this, it happens over and over and over. A deer will do that when it knows there's danger. It'll put its head down, but it never stops looking at you. It's waiting for you to
Yeah.
move. And as soon as it does, I got you now. I know
Yeah.
exactly where you're at. And that happens only so many times before you realize deer put its head down, don't move. You're
Yeah.
going to
And
have to give this thing minutes to settle down.
yeah, and they don't eat. And I think the reason they don't eat, Ryan, is because they know that when they eat, it creates noise.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So they stick their. I know exactly what you're talking about. They stick their head down. It's almost like they're peeking
Uh-huh.
to see if like whatever's around is going to give themselves up. Yeah, I know
Yep.
that's a good one, man. Um, but and that's a practical. And there's all these like other kind of even more just intuition stuff. I guess I would describe
Mhm.
it. And but those are cool things that I think you particularly pick up when you're trying to get close. Like
Yeah.
how close on the Atlatl, and I literally practiced pronouncing that before getting on this call because I didn't want to butcher it. But the Atlatl and your archery stuff, how close do you have to get, Ryan?
It depends on the animal. And I've taken some further shots and I've killed stuff, but let's put it this way. Most of the deer and hogs that I shoot are inside 11, 12 yards,
Yeah,
close. And that's on the ground. That's not up in a tree stand. I don't hunt a tree stand anymore. I'm not saying I never will. I'm sure I will at some point. But there's been a couple of times that maybe I'll crawl up in a live oak tree and stand on some limbs. But for the most part, I just love spotting and stalking. Again, I'd rather kill a doe, spot and stalk, than be in a tree stand and kill a deer, even a big one. Doesn't matter to me. I just love spot and stalk and primitive hunting. But typically, and then here I would say as of recent last couple of years, I've started shooting some deer more around 20 yards, and it's kind of based on what I feel like I can get away with because a lot can happen in 20 yards. It's not just an accuracy thing, but deer move, especially when you're shooting something that doesn't shoot as fast as a compound. It's obviously not nearly as noisy either. But with the atlatl, if I'm throwing at when I did the bison hunts, the first bison hunt, that's about 20 yards. Pretty good throwing distance, but very doable. Obviously, if you're well practiced up. And when I'm hunting hogs, I'd like to be in the 10-yard area again.
yeah,
You can actually get to a point where you're too close to them because then you're not even. The very first hog I ever killed was at like 6 or 7 yards, and you almost get to a point where you don't even feel like your spear's coming off the thrower, and
yeah,
so it's hard to be accurate when you're that close. Sometimes even shooting a bow that close is kind of weird, although that's significantly easier. I've shot some hogs that stalking through the tall grass that I've had shoot, I don't know, 2, 3 yards, like really, really close, like just
right.
so stupid close you can't miss. And you're just and at that point it's almost just an angles game, like they're because you have to be very particular with the shots you take too. You can't shoot through the shoulders, like stone points. they're the stone points in their haft, how they connect to the arrow. That's the weak point. So you
Okay.
can't force through. It doesn't matter how much weight you have in the arrow or how heavy the bow is. That's the weak link. So the haft is going to fail or the stone point's going to crush. So you can't just brute force it through. You have to wait for broadside or quartering away shots, or in some instances you can get a hard quartering to if you really had to and you could sneak it in kind of through the neck area, but I highly recommend against it unless they're super close and you know without a doubt you can put it on that golf ball. Um,
You're talking like a frontal, like
yeah,
a frontal type, yeah.
yep. So, get into the grass with, hogs that are, or into palmettos for that matter, and they're goofing around and it's like, I've got a shot and I could take it, but I can't, I know I'm not going to kill it. So therefore I can't take the shot. And then that's nerve wracking. You actually wish that you were further back because you have like a much better chance of not getting busted when you're
Yeah.
that close. But then sometimes it works out and they turn just perfect. Their head's obstructed and you just annihilate them at point blank. But that to me, I love that, to get as close as you can where you could just reach out your bow and touch them with a limb. That's what I'm way more excited about when I do that and I pull that off than when I, you know, have dumped a deer at 40, 45 yards, with an arrow and
Right.
made a great shot. It's like, cool, that was great, but that's not something I want to make a habit of doing. Um,
It's interesting, right? Because when I get that close to them, and for sure pigs a little bit more, but even elk, when I get, if this will a lot of times happen when I'm guiding and I'm calling elk and me and a hunter are separate and the bull knows where I'm at, so he comes right to me. He's like 5, 6 yards away from me, and because he's figured, he's coming to my tree instead of like swooping by the archer like we'd like him to, but he's right next to me. And if people haven't been in that position much, regardless of the species, I find it scary. You know what I mean? Like even being so, it's like I've killed pigs with a knife before. I've done the whole dog pig thing. That's
yeah,
different. That's different because like I know like okay, the dog's got the pig's pissed. I'm gonna dive in there and stab the pig. Right? It's all like forward momentum. But like when I'm 10 yards from a pig with my recurve, I get scared. I get scared because I'm like, okay, he's not pissed yet, but when I shoot, he's gonna get pissed. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So I think that people who haven't done it kind of underestimate that. And I mean, pigs obviously have the connotation of they will be aggressive, but even elk and stuff, man, like slamming them with an arrow from 5, 6 yards away, you're kind of like, man, what if he runs into me? You know
yeah, just
what
on
I mean?
accident, just getting away. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yep.
I don't know, but I see your pig videos. So I'm like, oh man, there's got to be a little bit of nerves on that stuff.
There used to be, now not so much.
Yeah,
I've only been attacked once, and it was funny because it was last year, and it was a big one.
a
It
pig.
was yeah, it was
Yeah.
really, really big. It was probably in the upper 200s, close 300. It was real big, and it was in really tall, what they call Kogan's grass, and it's just like these big grass mats. And I could see smaller ones in the grass, and I was slipping through really quiet, waiting for the perfect shot because I'm going to slam one of these things at like 5 or 6 yards. And then all of a sudden, the grass, I wasn't even looking at my feet. The grass just erupts and it was on me before I could do anything. But luckily, it's like I kind of um, splayed backwards a little bit and I put my hands on its head and I was able to grab an ear and then another one on its snout and I'm
Oh,
pushing it
yeah,
as it's trying to get me, but I don't want to fall on it and let it hook me. But I knew I didn't want to let it get my legs because it would just shred me up. And I fought it for felt like forever, but I know it was just seconds and it
sure.
turned and ran away. And actually I was really proud of myself because I never screamed. I often wondered if I would scream like a girl if that
Yeah,
happened,
yeah,
and I made a lot of like guttural
yeah,
sounds
yeah,
back,
sure, yeah, yeah, yeah,
but I
yeah.
was in full fight mode. I mean, there was no way to shoot it, and I don't carry anything else with me. I mean, when I'm hunting, I got a stone knife that I use to finish
Okay,
hogs off. So if I hit one in the spine or whatever, I'll run over, step on it, so it can't get me, and then I'll finish it off with a stone knife, save an arrow. And I mean, I can't even get to this thing because I'm fighting it. Luckily, it turned and ran away. Now I've been bluff charged a few times. I speared one with an atlatl that was looking like it was coming at me, and it's just kind of like, all right, I'm waiting for it to come, and then when it comes, you just kind of wait till the last second and try to hook out of the way, or jump
Yeah,
straight up and hope it runs underneath you. But that's kind of a gamble too. I mean, I didn't. There was no trees around or anything. But for the most part, when I shoot one, they don't really know that I'm there even after I shoot them. So a lot of times when I shoot, I just hold still, and then I've had a few on camera that will run and they'll run right by me, and I just hold perfectly still and they just keep
oh,
going. They're just trying to get away. At
sure,
that point, they've been shot. Um, I had one that's on like the reel of my intro for some of my videos or the outro as I use it. And it's a sow that I shot and she ran all the way around and then stopped and then started walking back towards me, kind of chomping with the arrow
sure,
sticking out of her side. And at this point now she sees me, so I'm pulling another arrow, but
yeah, yeah,
it's like we're just, if we got to do a fight, then we got to do a fight. But I think the difference is too that I'm not in that scenario, I'm not going to turn and run. And I think when they see that,
yeah,
they don't want any part. But no, we're talking Florida feral hogs. If we're talking about a Eurasian boar, I'm a little more scared in that scenario. I've never been in proximity to them, but um, I have no interest in fighting one of those. But at least I know I've been around enough hogs and I've grabbed a hold of hogs while they're alive. I've flipped them over.
sure.
Um, even in places where you're trapping them and you're dragging them out of pens, you got to get a hold of their tail, grab a hold of their legs. They're coming back trying to get you. You flip them over, that kind of stuff. So at least I'm comfortable to an extent
Yeah,
around.
just the exposure over time, you get more comfortable with it. It's funny you say the Eurasian board deal. So what I found, what's really interesting, I've got some good buddies and clients out in California that have a really cool ranch, and we'll typically make a trip out there every year. I try to hunt with my bow when I'm out there, and their pigs, unlike Texas where I've hunted them a lot, their pigs there, and I don't know if it's topography, genetics, or what, but their pigs are way more aggressive, Ryan. Like
Huh.
a lot. So there, a lot of times you're hunting them in, fairly broken up, fairly open, rolling hills with, big oak trees on it, and then thick canyons. So like Manzanita Canyon, stuff like that. But a lot of times, and they're mostly bluff type of charges, but even if you shoot a pig at 30 yards in the open, I have a video, it's on my channel, I think in my shorts somewhere, and there's kind of a funny component of it too. But I mean, I hit this pig and he looks around with the arrow in him, and he comes running from 35, 40 yards straight at me across the wide open. Like, his intentions are like, okay, like I see that you're causing whatever this pain is. You know what I mean? He
Yeah.
comes, and that's pretty typical there. And I haven't seen it in other places. And I don't know if it might be because it's so open. You know what I mean? Like they just know, like, oh, okay, like I can't get away, so I guess I'll just like be aggressive, or maybe it's a genetic thing. I don't know.
I don't know either.
But it's kind of interesting in that video. Why it's funny is like I videoed it with a GoPro on my head, and then my buddy is behind me and he's videoing it on his phone. So I have like both videos, and
Yeah.
I'm yelling at it because I just want it to stop as I try to get an arrow in, like kind of the same deal,
Yeah.
like sounds that are not planned. They're
Yeah.
basically like trying to deter it from coming any further while I'm like trying to get this arrow on. But my buddy bails. He's like backing up videoing, and then he just like, you can see his video. He just like rolls over and starts hauling ass up the hill. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a funny deal. But no, interesting stuff, man. But just being so close. The other thing you mentioned kind of rang a bell. I don't know if it applies to the Atlatl, but I spearfish a fair amount, Ryan, and a lot of times it's weird when you're spearfishing. You can totally get too close. And I've had shafts off big guns like bounce off a fish because they're not getting like the run of the band, like
Yeah.
the bands. So like
Hmm.
you're literally, the shaft is hitting them when it's halfway down the track of the gun, and there's no power. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I'm at how the Atlatl. It's just all leverage, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I got you. So I guess if you're really close, you're not probably not going to get the full power of it either.
Yeah, and it's just hard. What makes it so hard? Yeah, if you're really close, then I mean, there's nothing. You almost can't do anything with it. And it's the
Yeah.
spear is not stout enough to just stab it with the spear because
Oh,
it
okay.
flexes, it buckles a lot. It'd be like trying to stab something with like a long arrow. You know what I mean?
I
It's just
gotcha.
not gonna penetrate really well. And so it's like I'm intentionally sometimes out hunting with the atlatl and they're too close. I'm trying to actually back up so I can get a throw. I've had some that are just too close in like palmettos, and I can't do anything with this.
Sure.
Um, but also because when you throw it, that spear flexes. And so when it's flexing, that distance, it's like that tip generally is still pointed in the same direction, but there's a little bit of wiggle room. So if you give it some distance, say like 8 yards or more, that spear has a chance to kind of settle down a little bit. Now it's not hardly ever going to fly perfectly straight. If you go back and watch like the first bison that I killed in the snow at 20 yards, that thing's flexing the entire way. I mean, they do. They flex, they oscillate, like an arrow. People call it paradox. It's really not a paradox, it's oscillation. But um, just so people know what I'm talking about, if they're like, oh, an archer's paradox and the arrow moves, that's what they call it, but it's oscillation. Um, it'll oscillate the whole way to the target, but especially at those really close ranges, it's oscillating so much that it's really hard to hit what you're aiming at because
Oh.
it doesn't
The
have
the
time to
po- the
settle
point of
down.
impact's literally like boo, 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 boo,
Yeah.
boo. Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Yeah, I
Yep.
gotcha.
And I think
So
for the most part, the tip stays. In an ideal world, the knock end and the tip would stay perfectly still, and the center would oscillate. But I don't think it does.
I
It
gotcha.
has
I
it
gotcha.
has to settle down a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. You ideally it'd just be like flex of the shaft,
yeah.
but you're
Yep.
gonna have a little. Yeah, no, I see the dynamic that you're talking about. Man, I this is a subject I want to get in with you, man, because I think that me personally and guys that are more like modern type of hunters, I think we way overestimate the similarities of the way we hunt versus like historical man, right? Whatever that means. But the way you hunt's probably a whole hell of a lot closer. So my question is, Ryan, like, are there like how do you think people actually hunted back in the day, or are there things that you've come to realize that are probably like that, actually they were probably hunting like this versus what history, the history books tell us? Can you think of anything there? I do very few endorsement deals and I do no paid reviews because it would affect the type of content, quality of the knowledge I could put out. So an important part of my business model is my membership group. There's paid and free options. I do a weekly live stream there. There is a thriving community of folks that are helping everybody become a better outdoorsman. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're an expert, there's something there for you. Go join, guys. It helps me out a ton. It's the way to support this content and to support me. I'll see you there. All the info is at pwchuntsquad.com.
Yeah, it's a really complex subject. I wrote about it in at least in the two of my secrets and science books. So I got three secrets and science books, one of primitive archery, one of the atlatl, and one of building bows and arrows. But in the first two, the primitive archery and the atlatl, I talk about specific methods of hunting. And then you start thinking about introducing, if people introduce dogs or potentially
Sure.
poisons, although there's really no record of that in America, but that doesn't mean they didn't have some. But for the most part, different terrains and different animal species are going to open the door. And then just different people in general, like so many people hunt differently today
Right.
just based on culture and the location that they're at and how they were taught. So a big misconception is that the way that bison were hunted is they were all run off of cliffs, and that's did happen, and it happened, and some people were like, yeah, but only when they had horses. And it's like, no, actually, probably before they had horses. When they had horses, then they ran them down with the horses. But um, they did do that, but there's a lot of places that had human occupation that didn't have any cliffs.
Mm-hmm.
And so some places even were just like really rocky terrain that sometimes they could make worse by uprooting some of these rocks and making divots and then piling rocks, so it's just really rugged terrain and hoping that some trip and fall. And people seem to think that they weren't, especially, and I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush and say like all archaeologists this and this, because that's not the case, but a lot of them, believe that they weren't able to take like an atlatl and then just like kill it. And I don't know why that they thought that. Maybe they just thought that the weapon system wasn't powerful enough. I don't know. Especially because if you see a lot of guys that do target atlatl, very soft throw. So they're focused more on accuracy and they're a very soft lob straight in front. But if you watch
Okay.
anything that I throw, I'm throwing that thing like a baseball
Hard.
pitcher, but with leverage. So, um, comparably speaking, just my normal atlatl set produces about the same momentum as like a 60-pound compound bow. So
Okay.
it's very powerful. It's far more powerful than a primitive bow. So they're ideal for something like bison. So that was one of the very first tests that we did, and I wasn't 100% positive, but I wanted to really show what it would take to bring down a bison. Did you need a whole group of people charging after him and yelling like you see in Hollywood, which is obnoxiously ridiculous because it didn't happen like that? The whole sneaking through the grass, somebody blows a whistle, they all get up, ah, and then run when they're all chasing him and stuff. Sure, there were times that they pushed him over cliffs and did that, but you're not going to just run him down. Realistically, one guy can get close, work his way in like I did, where they see you. They got like a 40-yard buffer they'll let you get to. It's like bison are just bison no matter where you hunt them.
Yeah.
They'll let you get about 40 yards before they start getting real nervous. And then, but if you just hang around them, kind of like wolves will just kind of circle and hang around, eventually get closer and closer until they get one separated and then they'll start chasing them. Um, if I do that and I just start working closer and closer, they know I'm there, but they just get more comfortable with me there. Once I
Yeah.
get into a range, now I could throw much further, 30, 40 yards, but in the instance of this, I'm wanting to get, I mean, I could throw 30, 40, 50 yards with the Atlatl, a big size set. That's okay. And it would kill him at that distance. But I'm going for real accuracy. Work into about 20 yards. Okay. And then you still got to be careful because if you start making any sudden movements, now they're already sketchy, you know?
Right.
But one makes a mistake, he turned broadside, and it's like, okay, now it's time to take the throw. And the very first throw nailed it right through the heart and it ran over and it stood there for about 5 minutes. The rest of the herd moved on and it just locked its legs out and just stood there and just blood just pouring out of it. So it's like, I
Sure.
know it's going to go down. There's no doubt about it. But after about 5 minutes of it, I thought, and at this point, it's got its tail up, it's got its head down, but you could tell it's hurt. And I'm like, pretty dangerous situation because the thing without a doubt wants to kill us, but it's
Sure.
trying to decide if it's going to die or kill us, you know? But I'm like, I'm going to get in and try to get about another 20-yard shot on it, which it let me do because at this point it's just locked out. And then I put one through both lungs and within a few more minutes. So all told, I said it was less than 15 minutes. But one guy, even one spear, honestly would have killed it. And that kind of put people in a little bit of an uproar because they, for years, have said that the atlatl couldn't just kill a bison by itself, that it had to be a group that were just
Right.
harassing it and pincushing it to death. And then later on, too, when we started doing group hunts, we actually found that the group hunts were really inefficient. It's too many people.
Like they're
You're
they're they're too wary to it. Like they're
Yeah,
just yeah,
it's
yeah.
it that's when it turns into the shit show. Now we're chasing them around. Now it's turning into a pin cushion. Now if you make a bad hit and you think you can still get up and it's a shit show, then that's what you have to do. You follow through with it. Another group hunt we did, we just kept pushing them around until we got an opportunity. And the one guy that was with us, Tristan, it came running by and he slammed one into it, hit it right in the lungs. One projectile penetrated about 15 inches on the run, and that point is about as wide as my index finger and about as
Okay.
long as that. And that one projectile had it down and dead in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, it's like we really showed that one hunter could do it and it's actually more efficient. But now, if you're talking about having a whole group of people that need to eat, now I see the issue that one bison's not enough. If you're talking about, I mean, one bison can feed a lot of people for a couple days. It really
Sure.
can.
Yeah.
So that's probably enough. But if you now you're talking like big villages, that's when the whole cliff running thing, or now they're running them through an area and guys are stepping out behind rocks and now they're just trying to throw into them because they're not even trying to make one perfect kill. They're just hoping they're going to stick a few of these, wound them enough, track them, get up, kill them again. So it's like it's almost just anything goes, and depending on the size of the group you're at, the animals you're hunting, and realistically, think about primitive man. If you had to choose, if you had to do, don't even think primitive man. Think about you. You
Right.
have a family to feed. Would you, and you've got an atlatl. This is before bow and arrow technology. Would you rather target the bison that are over here, or would you rather target the elk? It's like you're
Right.
gonna want to target the bison. Number one, it's bigger and it's got more meat, but it's not nearly as spooky. So a
Right.
lot of people are thinking, oh, well, today we're gonna go elk hunting, and it's like probably not. It's like they
Yeah.
very heavily targeted bison.
Yeah.
Even
Dude, yeah, I totally hear you on that one because I've thought about that one a lot, Ryan, in the context of like bighorn sheep and
hmm
even mountain goats. Like, there's all these species they've developed. They evolve for certain types of predators, and where we fall in that matters a lot. I mean, in most of the country that I grew up hunting and outfitted in and guided in, the last species I would go after would be an elk. I would
yeah,
be all like bighorn sheep, kind of the same thing. If they'll hang in terrain. They'll get habituated to you. Like, I understand why the natives and the miners wipe those out first. You
yeah,
know what I mean? And then mountain goats. I mean, mountain goats, if you can deal with the terrain, you can kill them with a knife. You know
yeah,
what I mean? It's because they evolved to avoid predators by just sitting in like a steep rock. So as a
yeah,
human, you're smart enough to just, temporarily sit there and watch them until they make that one mistake, and then you go hide right next to the rock where you can get, and they're pretty dumb. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So I think you bring up a really good point. Is like some species are probably really susceptible to humans, and others weren't. And I'm sure their behavior changed a little bit too once humans got into an area. Whatever. There's that dynamic. I'm sure people would harp on, but you know, it's interesting. What one thing like in that discussion that popped in my mind was that um, the whole how history can be maybe a little bit bastardized because people just assume something. They just assume something we can't do without trying it. You know what I
right,
mean? I even think about that in the context. Like, you always hear that about the pyramids, right? People are like,
yeah,
oh, like aliens had to have done it, or somebody had to have done it, or we had to have had some technology because there's no way we could have done it. It's like, well, I don't know. I mean, have we tried? I'm suspicious that maybe we could have done it, but you're not going to know until you try. And I'm not trying to bash like the scientific community or academics or anything, Ryan. But I'm sure a lot of the people who wrote this history about the Atlatl, like a lot of them probably didn't hunt, and I don't think any of them probably tried it, So you don't know until you
right.
try.
There's
So
very few, very, very few. I know of
right.
one archaeologist. In fact, I actually just met him in person this last weekend. One
Oh, cool.
archaeologist that he doesn't, I don't know that he's ever hunted. I know he's thrown at fish and he throws the atlatl. I don't know his hunting extent. But anybody else that I know, they don't really hunt. Like they may throw the atlatl a little bit, recreationally, but there's a huge difference there between building an atlatl or even building a bow and arrow for that matter. I've said this for years that building one and even going out and using it, that's one thing. Go kill an animal with it, and that is a whole new world because anybody can build artwork. And a lot of what people put together doesn't actually work in the field. So they have this idea that if I build an atlatl or a bow and arrow, if I can go out and I can use it, all I have to do is just hit an animal and then it gets X's in its eyes and its legs go straight up in the air and it's dead.
Right.
And that's how it works. And they're like, well, I just hit it anywhere and then track it for 3 days or just follow it. And that's how you kill animals. They really have no idea how it's done
Right.
because, and so you don't know that until you actually go out and hunt. And that's why I always said you have to build, hunt, and butcher. That's the only way to know how this stuff was actually done. You can theorize about it all you want. You can sit, it's so fun to sit around a campfire with buddies and then just everybody talk about what they think has happened.
Sure.
And then they'll agree about it and it's a fun time. And then everybody will kind of rationalize something out. That's probably what they did. And then in reality, it's nothing like that at all until you till you build it, especially because somebody like, well, I built an atlatl and I could throw it. That's not the same as actually going out and killing stuff with it,
Going and
especially
killing
killing
something with it,
something like
sure.
a bison, you
Right.
know? So you get
Yeah.
a big, big dose of reality when you go out there and you're standing there in that moment and you're faced with this task to bring down this animal. And
Right.
most people would probably fail miserably just to take down a hog with one, let alone a bison. So their idea of it is just so skewed.
Right.
Um, they just got to go out and do it.
Did it take you quite a bit to get accurate with it, Ryan?
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
like just practice.
Yeah, at first you could stack 2 hay bales and I could be 10, 15 yards and I couldn't even hit the hay bales. I mean, just
Right.
not at all, and just progressively gets better and better and better. And then at one point I was to where between 10 and 15 yards I could hit like a beer can almost all the time. So I
Oh,
actually did
okay.
a video that was called Killing Cans with the Atlatl. And it's
Yeah.
just this montage of me stacking cans like pyramids and busting them down or putting them in a row and then having to hit all of them in a row, so that
Sure.
many shots. So there was a while there that I practiced just so diligently. Now I don't practice quite as much, but if I've got a big hunt coming up, obviously I'm out there practicing a lot more. But you can get very accurate with it. Maybe not as accurate as with a bow, but you can get pretty darn accurate with it.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And what's interesting to me, I mean, maybe this isn't the case, but you had like there's no guidance, right? Did you just have to like trial and error it in terms of technique and that sort of thing, or was there any guidance out there of like, hey, well, okay, how do I get better at it?
Yeah, there is now because I put stuff like that
There's
on
you,
my
there's
channel.
you,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and
sure,
there's maybe a couple other guys or whatever. Nobody's really seriously hunting with it other than me. I
sure,
don't think. Maybe one or two other guys, and I just kind of know them. But it was more so if I watched tutorials, it was just about target throwing, and it didn't do anything for me. So I just learned, especially like when I grew up shooting a bow, I didn't have like tutorials to teach me. I just took a bow and went out and shot it until I figured it
yeah,
out. So I'm not like a form archery guy. A lot of times people watch me shoot and they're like, "You shoot stupid," and I was like, "Yep." And I for years people would be like, "You're never gonna be successful shooting that way. You're never gonna kill any animals." And it's like now I've just killed over 70 big game animals with sticks and rocks, and I've won a couple tournaments. And I'm not really a tournament shooter, but it's like you can shoot any way that you want. I believe as long as you just find a way to be consistent. But when it comes to throwing the atlatl, the only big thing to me is stabilization through the throw, where you have to, and you just learn this through trial and error. You have to try to keep the tip of the atlatl as stable as possible. Most people set up to throw and then they lean it back first, and that moves the tip. So they're moving it
okay,
around. So they're actually they kick back and then they step forward and throw, and you lose so much accuracy where you have to train. It's so hard. Train yourself to hold it and don't move it. And then either if you do a step throw or not a step throw, there's two different methods there, is you have to be able to throw it without ever moving the tip.
I
And
gotcha,
then do that and being able to throw hard. And you don't have to throw as hard as you can, but you have to be able to throw hard. And that's where the target archers, they do it more in front of them and it's just their elbow. And that's where it's like they just throw very gently like
sure,
this, as
just
opposed to,
lobbing it,
okay, I'm here and now I'm whipping this thing.
yeah,
So, but yeah, pretty much just trial and error, just going, if I had to kill an animal with this, what's it going to take? And me lobbing this thing, I was like, I don't,
doesn't work,
I'm,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not thinking this is going to work out so good.
yeah.
So
That's cool though, because you figured out probably pretty damn close to how they actually used it. Because we
yeah,
don't, yeah, like we obviously have the artifacts, but we don't have any YouTube video of them doing it. So you had to figure that part out, and the only way to do it is go out and try to kill something with it, which is pretty freaking neat. You know what I've thought about a lot? I've been there's a couple areas that I go to, Ryan, that have there's probably a a actual word for it, but where guys have sat and there's just shards,
yeah,
shards of arrowhead points. I know a few of those spots, and it's funny because the couple spots that I know about, they're right at glassing points.
yeah.
That I would use as a glassing point. So the guys are obviously hunting, or it was a good spot to pass time and work on their arrowheads. But what's interesting is, man, I've sat at those spots a lot, and I want to know if this is an accurate interpretation of like the Stone Age. But I sit there and I'm like, what's interesting is that I pick up these shards. It's clear that some ancient, in ancient history, somebody worked on these, which is really neat to me. But what's even cooler is if I think about it, there was probably a guy here working on an arrowhead, and he looked over and he found an arrowhead that was like 500 years old, but he was able to recognize that it wasn't from his generation. You know
Sure.
what I mean? And it's like, I think people, at least tend to forget, like, oh, the Stone Age is way longer than like the firearm modern bow age. And
Oh
there's like
yeah.
all these, like, and they're there forever, pretty much. I mean, unless they get eroded away or whatever. But to me, it's like, oh yeah, these guys that are making arrows at one point were actually like collecting other people's arrowheads, probably. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That were hunting in the same area or whatever. I don't. I mean, one, I wanted to like. Do you think that's probably accurate, or
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
different
I mean,
styles?
they'd probably for sure too find like broken pieces because if you go out, especially if you're hunting with an atlatl, even with a bow, if you throw at something and you miss and your point breaks, or you kill it and the point breaks, you just bring the whole spear back to camp or to your glassing point or whatever it is that you're doing, um, and you'll make that repair there. So you're just going to show back up with a broken one. So that's why there's always so many broken halves, like the back halves,
Oh, yeah. They
in
just
like
tore it off the spear and threw it in the
and throw it
pile.
down because it's
Ah,
broken. And so that's why as opposed because people are like, oh well, they're starting to look around all this stuff, going, oh, it'd be cool to find a whole one. Well, the chances of finding a whole one are so slim because you didn't make it and throw it on the ground. You put it
yeah.
in your place. Now it is possible. I've dropped some in tall grass before and been like, oh crap, and you look around,
Sure.
look around, look around. All right, whatever, I guess that one's gone, and tall grass one day could be just bare dirt the next, and or years and years later. And the other thing too is people find whole ones, around campsites or stuff like that, but they're in terrible shape. It's either knife blades or spear points or whatever that have been just resharpened and exhausted. They're just junk. So they're just not usable anymore, and so then they're discarded. And then, like I say,
Right.
occasionally they'll find something that's really nice. Now, the little true arrow points that people call bird points, which are used to kill everything, those you'll lose a lot more often just because they're so small. So it is easy to kind of accidentally bobble one of those, or if you're holding a few of them. I mean, I've done
Right.
it like where I'm sitting down, napping next to people, set stuff on the ground, and then go to pick it up. And then as I'm working on stuff, have set one that's not in the same pile. And next thing you know, I think I got them all, and so they do get left. Um,
Right.
Stuff like that happens, but for the most part, yeah, when people are in those debitage sites, that's what they call it. So all the flakes, that's all debitage. That's what it's called.
Okay.
That's when you find most people are finding back halves, and then sometimes the front halves. But then the front halves are because they actually broke it during manufacture.
I gotcha. But
Yeah,
I get what you're saying though. Like, just in the total volume of stones that people worked on, the vast majority, because it was a consumable, right? So it was
yeah,
like you weren't going to set it down until it was useless, right?
right,
Like, or yeah.
absolutely.
So I get that like that's really what you're always looking at. I'm curious, Ryan, like how long does it take you to make one? Like, let's say that the all the technology on Earth vanished, and it's just Ryan out there with his bow. You shoot at a deer, you break the arrow point, your last arrow point. I assume maybe you'd carry like a blank or something like that. Maybe I'm using the wrong term, but how long would it take you to make replace that arrowhead?
I would say it takes me an hour or less to make a pretty darn nice one.
Okay.
And I did a test a while back as far as making expedient atlatl points. So ones that I wasn't worried about it looking perfect, which is, normal for artifacts anyway. A lot of them aren't perfect, but they're still very serviceable. And I ran a test on that to see how fast I could kind of make them within reason. And about the shortest amount of time that I got was about 20 minutes or 22 minutes. And then I had some, in the 30-minute range. But I typically say it's less than 45 minutes, an hour if I'm trying to make it really, really nice. And then the contextual little arrowheads that are just made out of flakes, you can pop those out pretty fast too. So, like, less than 20 minutes. But typically, like when I go hunt, I've got now when it's arrows, I've got my arrows, but on my quiver, I've got a little pouch, and I keep in the pouch some hafting resin, some sinew to tie them on, and then usually some points that are already made. So if I really get into a bind, and then I carry a little flaker to sharpen too. So if I shoot one and it's too dull, or I break the tip or something like that, I can fix it. But then I just carry whole points, and then if I need to, I can come back at night. Like now when I hunt, I just carry a lot of arrows and I leave them wherever I'm hunting. But when I have to make a repair, I can repair it with that stuff, and I have the points already ready. Now, if it's when it's with the Atlatl, then I carry a bunch of foreshafts. So I've got a whole bunch of replaceable foreshafts that I can pop out of the main shaft and then pop new ones in. So I've already got those made up ahead of time. But if you're talking about, that's just me, but if you're really talking about early people, especially in the time of the Atlatl when they were a little bit more nomadic, they still had civilizations, especially um, once horticulture came around. Um, but they used to actually travel great distances to good rock supplies. So that was like a big event. So you will find good quality rocks from the Edwards Plateau in Texas, and you'll find that stuff all the way up into, say, Colorado, Wyoming.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so they would travel, and I think that what they were probably also doing was following different herds of bison at different times of the year, but then they just knew,
Sure.
or you think wintertime, sometimes they moved just to get away from the winters and they would hunt their way down, but then they would bring, so I don't necessarily think that they were just going there for the rock, but you're not just going to bring, but I say all that to say this, you're not just going to bring like these whole rocks and carry them. I mean,
Right.
they didn't have a truck to throw them in the bed back then, so they would process all of that stuff out and then just make a lot of preforms as opposed to just finishing a whole bunch of finish points. That's why there's some places that'll have caches of just preforms. So they'll
Oh,
travel
okay.
so far and then they'll drop like a whole cache of preforms
Yeah.
in a place in case they need to come back to it later.
Yeah.
They get into a halfway point.
Yeah, it makes sense just from like the weight savings and the bulk. They'd work it up where the rock was, and then they
Yep.
just take what they needed. But I see what you're saying. Like when they actually were out hunting, their their backups of heads would be finished heads, and they're durable enough for that, huh, Ryan? Like if you had a couple, heads in your pocket, they don't get beat up. Like they'll hold up.
They do a little bit. I take just a little strip of leather and I just kind of roll them,
Oh, okay.
and so they've got a little bit of cushion in between, and then I can tuck them into a little bag or something somewhere. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not a big deal to do that. That's normal. They just live in my quiver. I've got some that just never come out. They just live there,
Sure.
and it kind of gets banged around, but they're plenty durable for that. And
Yeah.
when they're sitting up, like you mentioned, they sit up on those glassing points. We filmed one of those in our Arizona hunt. It was
Oh,
overlooking
okay.
a water hole in a spring, which was neat,
Sure.
and there was just debitage everywhere. Um, but that's a point where if you just had, you're going to have that rock, so you're kind of bored sitting up there all day anyway if you're just waiting for stuff to come by. And I'm sure that they sent people up there, probably younger guys or whatever, and just be like, your job's to just to go up there and sit and let us know, when the animals, you can see them coming,
Yeah.
herd of bison or whatever. So they're probably just sitting up there cutting up and having a good time and breaking rocks. And so I can imagine what that would look like. And it's probably two or three guys, maybe just one guy by himself. It's hard to say, but
Yeah, yeah, sure. Just hanging out there, getting a little work done, but also kind of scouting for everybody at the same time.
yep,
Yeah, that
working
makes
on your
sense.
gear.
Dude, I have to. Well, first I gotta ask you a question that's completely unfair, Ryan. But I want to know your honest opinion. So if I took you and I dropped you 300 years ago amongst guys that did this for a living, what do you think they'd think of your ability to make arrowheads? You think they'd still consider you a newbie, or do you think you'd be like a moderately good at it?
Compared to a lot of artifacts, it depends time period and location. That would make a big difference. If you dropped me with those guys, I think that they would probably tell me that I spent too long making it too perfect.
Oh, okay,
And
sure.
they would say make them faster and stop worrying about it,
Yeah,
kind of a
let's
thing.
go
Which
hunting. Yeah,
you
yeah.
still need to make them good, but now there's some places that had phenomenal artisans that I can't replicate. But that's going to be all throughout history in different times. Some people are just super
Just
gifted with it.
pros. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I definitely wouldn't think that they would look at me as a newbie. I think that they would probably look at me as a skilled napper.
Sure.
Um, but they would probably just be like, yeah, stick with that whole 20-minute thing that you were doing. That worked
Yeah,
out
let's go
really good.
hunting.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
if we needed stuff. But if not, they probably didn't care. I mean, I think that's the reason that we have some really fine pieces is because people were sitting around just waiting. So they just had time to put into making those really, really nice points too.
Yeah, yeah. Like,
Because everybody loves to, kind of do their best job. Not everybody, but there's
sure.
some people that just want to exceed expectations. They want to be the best, so
Yeah.
they'll put more into it.
Yeah, yeah, like in everything, I think you're right. Like that's just human nature, man. Like if you had the time to do it, I'm sure even if you were like a big time, utilitarian hunter, you'd be like, I got the time today, I'm gonna make a perfect one, you
Yeah.
know. And then yeah, I could totally see that. I actually I think it's been probably a year or so, but I bought one of your flint knapping kits,
Oh, did you?
and if anybody's interested in this, they should go to your website. I hate to admit it, man. When I get into your website, I feel like I feel like a kid again. And dude, like I'd buy everything on there, but I just don't have the time. You know what I mean, Ryan?
Yeah.
But it's so much cool shit. But the flint napping, it's hard. Like when you start doing it, you realize like, oh, this is you got to really put in some time to become competent at this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Even with the good guidance that you've got on YouTube and that sort of thing, like there's a lot of good tutorials out there, but still, like it's not. It's something that when it's taught by somebody that knows what they're doing, it comes across as much easier than it actually is. Just takes some time.
Yeah,
So
when I first got started, it took me 6 months probably of just beating up rocks to get something that even resembled an arrowhead.
yeah,
And now it's like because YouTube wasn't a thing then, you couldn't just look it up. Now you could get some old VHSs and stuff, and watch some of those. But again, hard to capture that. Maybe I just was too young even to really grasp it. But that's why, like when I teach on there and I have like the flint napping for beginners videos, I really try to explain everything that I possibly can. And now people will come up to me at like Silver River Napping or whatever and be like, "You taught me how to flint nap," or they'll send me pictures of stuff and they'll be
yeah.
like, "Oh, this is my first one," and I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" It's like and I'm like, wow. I was like, this dude's going to be so good if he sticks with it, Or, oh, I've only been napping for 2 months. And I'm like, holy cow, this is crazy. But it's
Yeah.
because, you have good instruction. And so I always really pride myself on having like good tools and good instruction to teach people to do this. But, one of the things that I love so much about this primitive hunting and primitive building is that it is such a discipline because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to build all my stuff and go kill a deer with it. It will, you could learn flint napping and you might take to it fast. And maybe you're even within a couple weeks making a point that you could go kill a deer with. That's possible. Or maybe you learn bow building and within a couple months or a couple weeks, you've built a bow. But if you want to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, it's not even something you're going to be able to do in a year. It's going now you could build a whole set in a year, but the chances of it being really any good, very, very slim. It will take years and years and years to build everything. And that was one of the goals with me with the Hunt Primitive business was ultimately I want to teach people how to do this. Some people will want to do it. Some people just won't. They'll say, I'd rather buy the stuff. And that's great because then I can facilitate that. But then also, I somebody that may be really interested in making their bow, they get a bow made and they're excited. They want to hunt this year, but they're not ready. Now they need arrows, but arrows are actually more tough to build than the bow is. Most people don't realize that. They put all their time into the bow and then it's not shooting very good. And then they blame the bow and turns out it's actually the arrows. So it's like a progressional step thing for me where if people build a bow, but now they need arrows, they can just come to me and buy arrows until they learn to make their own arrows. And
Right.
then it's the same thing. Now I'm making my arrows, but I don't know how to make points, so they can buy the points. And then it's like, but I want to learn how to build the points. So it's like, here's the napping kit, here's the tutorial. So it's like I'm teaching people how to do all of it, how to build the bows, how to make, even when they want to get into primitive strings, which is like the next big step after you've built the bow, you've made arrows, you've napped your own points, you're still shooting a modern bowstring. Now it's like, now I'm ready for that next level. And that's like making a primitive bowstring, because that robs a tremendous amount of power from your bow compared to modern bowstring materials. So this is something that people can stick with for years and years and years, and get better and better, but never feel like they're just going to master it within a year or two. And it's
Yeah.
almost like that. So it's like kind of like a Dunning-Kruger thing too, right? So you think that, oh, you just kind of make it, and early people did it. How hard could it be? You just make stuff and go out and shoot it. And you have no concept of it until you start. And then to actually go out and use it in the field and kill stuff. And then after that, make a knife, go butcher it with the stone knife, learn what all that stuff's about. This can keep you busy for a long, long time. And to me,
Yeah.
it really is. It's a discipline. I think I heard Joe Rogan, I think, was one I heard say that he was like, archery or bow hunting is a discipline, because somebody, he was talking about it being a sport. And he goes, I don't think it's a sport. He goes, it's more of a discipline. And I
Right.
was like, I completely agree with that. And then I thought about it in my terms with primitive hunting, and I'm like, oh, this is a severe discipline if you
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
get into all of it. Because then you do all that, now you're like, cool, now I want to do the atlatl. So you
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
all over again.
Yeah, yeah. It's fun, dude. I mean, my discussions with him about archery and stuff like that. He loves going down rabbit holes. Like he would love. I've never talked to him about your stuff, Ryan, but he would love your shit, dude. Because
Yeah.
he goes to, like all of us, but even more to an extreme case. The guy doesn't have much time on his hands, but he goes down these rabbit holes
Yeah.
hard, you know. But and your stuff is right along the lines. But man, I love the concept of your business because I think you're right. I think you're right, man, because for me, it's one of those things that I look at it and I like for instance, I would love to do the whole process, but I'll be realistic. Like I got a million other things going. So it's nice to be able to be like, oh, hey, I can buy the flint knapping kit. And I have even that at that level, it's like at least I have the tools, kind of have a place to start. I can sit down with my son Wyatt and we can play with it. And then, you know, once we get that down, I could put them on arrows that I bought from you. It just to me it makes it more accessible for like I guess like the modern guy with a bunch of other crap
Yeah.
going on in his life, you know, because it's hard. Let's admit, or at least I'll admit that it's hard to start a hobby that you're not going to see any results for like 2 years. You,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
it's just hard. I
It's really hard.
Yeah, like I was when I got your flint knapping kit, I thought that making a knife would be fun, you know. And your knives on your website are beautiful. I'm gonna buy one, man, just to use it as like because the other thing about it is then you have an example. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like you have an
Yep.
example in front of you, and that helps a lot too. Other than that, you're just kind of like, you know, throwing in the dark, you know. But no, great stuff, Ryan. I don't want to steal any more of your time, man, but let people know where they can follow you, where your store is, all of that good stuff.
Huntprimitive.com, that's the website. And then Instagram's Hunt Primitive, YouTube's Hunt Primitive, and Facebook, it's still a little bit of a play off of the original Gill's Primitive Archery. So it's like Hunt Primitive / Gill's Primitive Archery on Facebook. There is just a Hunt Primitive page on Facebook, but it's kind of just a landing page. So I always tell people to
Okay.
look for the one that has the more followers and stuff. Um, and I know podcasts only run certain long distance. If there's anything else you want to ask, I'm still good with time, so don't think you have to punt me off on my account if there's anything else you got. But I'm fine folding up whenever you are. But um, I guess one thing that I would like to tell folks
Yeah,
that
of
are
course.
still listening is there's this weird disconnect that seems to happen when modern hunters interact with primitive hunters. And maybe it's they're worried that, like, years ago, for sure, I could come off as an elitist. And at this point, I'm just here having fun. I'm a guy that likes to build primitive and go hunt. But I think in a day and age now, we see so often where everybody's so negative or at each other's throats, even within the hunting community. And modern people will give me such a hard time about the stuff that I hunt with. And maybe it's retribution. Is that right? For when I would give people a hard time in my youth, being like, "Oh, you the training wheels combat." Like none of that bothers me anymore, and I don't
Right.
think that at all. So maybe it's payback, but I think if people just understood primitive hunting more and why me and other guys hunt primitive, that it would open the door for them, even if they don't want to do it, that they would be able to appreciate it more. But it's almost just like this huge disconnect where somebody will see one of my bows or something and they'll be like, well, that's stupid. I can shoot way further with my compound bow. And it's like you're looking at it so one dimensionally.
Right.
And it's why I'm kind of hoping that, podcasts like this that reaches modern people, that maybe that, modern hunters, I'm a modern people too, but modern hunters, that they'll be able to look at it just going, it's a passion, and it is really efficient when you get to using it. Like it kills animals just as fast as a compound and mechanicals or fixed blades metals or whatever. If you shoot a deer with sticks and rocks and you put it through the lungs, it's going to be dead typically in less than 50 yards. So I
Right.
mean, it's kind of the same thing all the way around it. Is it going to be as fast as a rifle? Depends. I mean, you shoot a bison with a 223, that's obviously not going to be. You'll kill it faster with an atlatl. So it's
Sure.
just, it's almost you're comparing apples to rocking chairs. It's not even
Right.
apples to oranges. So,
Right.
but yeah, if folks could get more into it, I think that not even that they have to be into it to do it, but maybe understand it and appreciate it more. And that's the only message that I really want to spread to people is look at it as just somebody enjoying the outdoors the way that they want to, and it's not a competition,
Yeah.
if
No,
that
I
makes sense.
no, I think it makes a ton of sense, man. And I hope some of the discussion that we had like opens that up to people, you know? I mean, to me, man, just watching your videos. I mean, I would say that I'm very like low level primitive hunter in the sense that I've shot a few animals with my recurve, you know? Um, but it's like watching your videos, it just makes me want to go try it more. And I think there's a
Yeah,
component of that too, Ryan. And it's I mean, you could take this discussion, you could extend it to, not only weapon choice, but, species choice and all of that stuff. And it's like I think that hunters tend to put on whatever type of hunting they're doing, they'll tend to put on like a pedestal, really, really to their own detriment. You know what I mean? Because every time I've gone out of the box, like I'm sure, dude, if I went down and tried to kill pigs with you with an atlatl, like even saying that out loud seems insane to me. But I
we
bet,
should
I
try it
bet,
sometime.
I bet we have a damn good time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because every time I've gone out of the box, to go try something, even if it's something that I've historically shit on, I end up being like, this is tons of fun, man. So
yeah,
I totally agree with your point, man.
yeah. You ought to try
And
that sometime. Come on down and hunt hogs with the atlatl. I'll set
yeah,
you
yeah,
up.
you're not too far from me in Puerto Rico, so I might have to do it, man, on the way
Yeah,
back up to the States at some point. But I dude, I hope you enjoyed the conversation, Ryan. And all
yeah,
what we'll do is we'll do it again, man. We'll do it
yeah,
again and we'll talk about some more stuff. But I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
yeah. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this content, do me a huge favor. Subscribe on whatever platform you consume it on. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever works for you guys. Everything else is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. Go there and it's going to be very apparent to you that I work my ass off just to not have a real job. All the hunts I guide, all the seminars I put on, all the unique experiences I offer, and the membership site, all the details are there.